Hello and welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast. My name is Steven Railston. I am your host today, and we're recording on a Friday afternoon here in Manchester, for some of us in Manchester at least, because Samuel's still down in the south waiting for West Ham on Sunday. But I'm joined by my two colleagues, Samuel Luckhurst, as I've mentioned, and Rich Fay, who were both down on the south coast. Was it the sunny south coast, lads, down at Brighton on Thursday night, where Manchester United were defeated 1-0. It was very, very sunny. I can see you with your tan there, Samuel. That's why I said that. Defeated 1-0 by Brighton in the end. A very, very late goal. A cruel way to concede in the end. However, yeah, Brighton were probably good value for their win, as we'll get into. But first of all, Samuel, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. A little bit tired, but that's to be expected after a pretty grueling day. But it did help, the weather in Brighton, and I might save the story for the end of the podcast, like Rich's Vessel story at Fulham. But there was a decent Larry David Curb Your Enthusiasm style moment on the M6 toll that was the real victory of the day. So it was a day not without gains.
That's a tease, isn't it?
Is there any you sitting in the greenhouse as well, Samuel, for the listeners who are watching on YouTube?
This is my parents. Yeah, I know it's pretty warm in here, but this is my parents' conservatory. I've set up shop down here for a few nights, given the travel chaos that the coronation brings, and also the fact that United are at West Ham on Sunday.
Yeah, makes sense. Rich, how are you? You've made the trip back up to Manchester.
Yeah, it was a grueler this morning to get back from Brighton to Manchester. I was contemplating sort of having a lazy morning on the south coast, but it was so grey and miserable that I thought, let's go home to a grey and miserable Manchester instead. But yeah, it was a fun away day. And for 95 minutes, as we'll get into, it was probably okay for United. They would have settled for a point, but oh well, how the tables have turned.
Yeah, well, it wasn't a fun away in the end for the United fans who travelled down, and the drew was obviously to the match. I mean, it's not been a happy place to visit as at the Amex over the last few seasons. That horror show last year, the 4-0. But at least, Samuel, it was just 1-0 this year. Improvement, eh? 3 fewer goals. Look, Brighton, I guess, with a better side after half time. United had the chances, looked quite good, did not take them. How many times we've said that this season, really? Was that your verdict leaving the stadium, Samuel, when you just thought, look, United should have took the chances, Brighton improved in the second half and eventually won the game, and probably deservedly so?
If they'd got a point there, it would have been a positive point, because Brighton are such a good side. I'd say that they're better than two of the Champions League semi-finalists. I'd fancy them against either of the Milan clubs. And certainly, I suppose what kind of told it a tale, even though it was all meaningless, was that after the ball grazed Luke Shaw's hand, you had a shot that Fernandes cleared off. It wasn't quite off his line, but he was there or thereabouts. The ball comes across, it narrowly misses a Brighton player, and then De Gea makes a save. Brighton were the ones who were really going for the win. United seemed to accept that a draw would be a good result, and I think it would have been, if they'd got 4 points against Brighton and West Ham, that would have been a good return, particularly given their Premier League form away from home. But it was Brighton that were forcing the issue, and there are a lot of angles to it, because as Rich and I discussed, you go back to that very belated Fernandes penalty that was awarded after the game had ended at Brighton a few years ago. You go back to the shootout last month, and then this game was decided by another penalty. But although there was a very frantic 100th minute rewrite, I think a lot what I'd already written stood, because United are dreadful at scoring goals. There's a lack of firepower in that team. And an interesting plot strand from it was that 5 years ago at the Amex, they lost 1-0, and Mourinho came out afterwards and he said to the reporter who asked the question, it wasn't me, and he said, you should be disappointed because you keep asking, and he didn't mean him, he said he meant the media in general, because it was a topic at the time. You're always asking, why don't you play this player, why don't you play that player, why do you always play Lukaku? This player and that player were Marshall and Rashford, and of course again last night, 5 years on, Rashford and Marshall leave the Amex having not scored. I know it's not quite as black and white as that, and Rashford has become a pretty good goal scorer in the last 4 years, bar last season's aberration. Mourinho was right about Marshall. He was right then, and he looks particularly prescient now, and I'm sure we'll get into him. And unfortunately for United, I mean, Anthony was guilty of it as well. Second minute chance, he should hit the target at the very least. But in the second half, Marshall and Rashford changed positions. And we've said time and again, and listeners must be sick to death of us saying the same thing, but it's going to be an issue until the very end of the season. And Ten Hag, I think, certainly looking ahead to the cup final, he's got to have someone playing up top who's in some relative form or some rhythm. Rashford's actually only scored 5 goals in his last 16 games. He's had a brilliant season, but his goal scoring in the last 2 and a bit months, it feels like, has not been particularly great. And one of those goals, it wasn't his goal in the League Cup final. It was a clear own goal, but the EFL's incompetence extends to the dubious goals panel, it seems, that was abolished years ago. So I thought the first half performance of United was pretty good, and it was a really good game as well. It was a travesty. It was 0-0 for nearly 100 minutes because there were plenty of chances. There was some excellent attacking play, and I chatted to our editor when I was filing the ratings. I said, this is going to be the kiss of death here, but I've done the ratings provisionally, and the headline said Manchester United player ratings as Luke Shaw and David De Gea good, and I'd have Shaw down as 8 out of 10, pretty much the man of the match. He didn't put a foot wrong, but he did put his hand in the air, and that undid all his good work. So it was a real pity for him, but you knew as soon as you saw it, and he knew as soon as that decision was being checked, that it was that a penalty was going to be given. So of all the bad defeats they've had this season, this was bad in a different way. It was just a pretty bitter way to take it.
That Rashford stat's quite interesting. I hadn't actually realised that. He has given us the impression, since he's come back from injury, that he might not actually be fully match fit. So if you guys agree, and I've been watching him, I don't think he looks 100% sharp and 100% on it. I did notice actually in Club Media, I did an interview midweek, and I was laughing because he was full of cold. So maybe he was a bit under the weather. Maybe that's the excuse for not finding the back of the net. Rich, look, the poor away form, we've talked about it time and time again. As Samuel said, we're kind of banging our heads off the walls at this stage, or the listeners are. You tweeted after the game, they took 1 point away from home from the top 9 this season. And if you manipulate those statistics a little bit further, they've only actually defeated Fulham and Wolves in the top 15 this season in the Premier League, away from home. So it just shows you that on the road, this team are really struggling, aren't they? And that's a really big problem that needs to be addressed.
It almost feels like they've done a reverse Solskjaer. Under Solskjaer, you'd back them against all the big teams, and they'd be dreadful against the smaller teams in the league. And now they beat the minnows away from home quite comfortably. You think of basically everyone that's threatened with relegation. United have gone to their place and won this season, and that is a positive. That's a step in the right direction. But you're right, against these bigger teams, they just don't seem to have it in them. I'm not sure why that is, which is probably the ultimate question, isn't it? And the one that Ten Hag needs to answer this summer. I think a lot of it is down to personnel. I think it's the fact that United, as Samuel said, even in terms of the strikers, but in terms of all areas of the pitch, are still relying on players who have had question marks next to their names for half a decade now, and they've not been sort of moved on. And it's a real tricky one to solve. You can't just carry on saying throw money at it. But I do think that is a huge element of this. I think also just the tactical approach of these bigger teams in the league. They tend to be set out to attack, and they know how to get past United's attempts at a press. The smaller teams sit back, invite United to attack a bit more, and that caters to the likes of Casemiro, Fernandes and Eriksen, creative things from deep. But against teams who are in your face and running and erratic and have that energy, United just can't match it. And I think that was apparent again on Thursday night. For the first half, United did kind of match Brighton. They pressed really well early on. They should have scored. Anthony should have scored after 2 minutes. I don't care how early on in a game it is. He always seems to need a few attempts to fine-tune his finishing, and maybe on the third or fourth attempt he'll find the back of the net or the target. But he's got to work on that, and inexcusable miss for a player of his quality, I think, to not get that on target. And United did match Brighton. They were just as good as them for the first 20 minutes, 30 minutes. But then that energy went. They were sapped. They were depleted. Ten Hag keeps on saying that his players are given their role. He's really happy with their fitness levels. And yes, they've had this grueling season. They've played more than any other team in Europe, and there's going to be a detriment to that. You've got to think of the players' welfare. Lots of these United players were involved in the World Cup as well. So even when they've technically had a rest from club football, they've not had a rest whatsoever. But United's energy levels dropped in the second half. They couldn't match Brighton. And as Samuel said, the goal in a way didn't really change much. It meant that United didn't get a scrappy point that, would have been a real boost. It meant that they lost and they could have a few complaints really, because they were on the ropes for the last 20 minutes or so. Brighton were excellent. They responded in style and they had that extra motivation. I think De Zerbi said post-match, that it really did pain them the way that they lost in the cup semi-final, and he thinks that they are the better team, and they went and showed that in the end. And for United, this record doesn't have a quick fix. I think it's tactical in terms of being able to cope with the press better, but I think a lot of it is still down to personnel. Ten Hag just simply doesn't have the players to play with the intensity for as long as he needs them to.
Yeah, it definitely felt the game was heading only one way in those latter stages, didn't it? Samuel, in press conferences, Ten Hag's kind of played down the away form, I've noticed, when he's been asked about it, actually. And he's been increasingly asked about it over the last few weeks, or the last month and a half, when I think it's starting to become more of an issue and people are starting to realise it was perhaps once under the radar. But I thought it was interesting, ahead of kick-off, he discussed a bit more head on, and he said it was about personality and about character. And obviously Richard's just looked at the kind of the tactical aspects of it, and coming out in the second half they do lack intensity. They just don't seem to have the same energy sometimes after half time. But is that a massive thing in that dressing room in these away games? I know we've discussed about it quite a lot on this podcast. Against Newcastle away from home, we questioned the character of the players. Against Sevilla, we questioned it as well. Do you think that has a big say in it, in these kind of performances?
In terms of the players' character, or
the characters in the dressing room and the mentality on the pitch, I guess, from the players.
Yeah. I think that Ten Hag, with what he said in recent weeks, it's clear that there are certain players in the dressing room, in the squad, that he doesn't think have the requisite character to make United a genuine force again. I think, as I said, I think at the start of the week, in terms of having the right mentality and character, it doesn't mean you're always winning things. I mean, Liverpool didn't win things every season under Klopp, but even in seasons where they were coming close to City last season, a couple of seasons before that, when I think they finished with 97 points or whatever it was, and only came second, the mentality was spot on, and there was little to change about the squad they had. I think the season after they came second in 2019 and of course won the Champions League, I don't think they didn't make a major signing in the summer, did they? I think they signed a defender who has barely played for them, but it was almost as if they knew that they were on the right path, and they had complete faith in those players to get them over the line the next season, and they obliterated the competition, and the league was won before the clocks went forward. And of course there was just the delay because of the pandemic. United have got a long way to go to get to that level, and in order to get to that level, it all comes down to personnel, because the manager is completely right. I don't think anybody is disputing that. He's not perfect. There have been issues over the last month with his game management. Maybe the pressure has told there in certain ways, and certainly when you're in that. When you're in April and you are a manager, we're not managers, but we know that it's a different kind of pressure from managing Ajax to managing Manchester United. I mean, when Ten Hag took Ajax to the Champions League final, they were riding a crest of a wave. They had no expectation of doing that at the start of the season. With United, the expectations are different. In the Europa League, they were the favourites to win it pretty much after Arsenal went out to Sporting Lisbon. So that was a failure, and it was a big failure as well, given how badly they lost to Sevilla, going from 2-0 up after 80 minutes in the first leg and losing 5-2 on aggregate. When that happens, there are character defects in that squad, and they keep repeating the same mistakes, whether it's poor finishing, the shot selections. I mean, Marshall's opportunity last night, looking at it, again, we're not professionals, we're not experts, and certainly my shooting five-a-side is pretty dreadful. But I'm looking at it, I'm thinking all he's got to do is if he keeps it down, the likelihood is that it's going to go past Steele. But if you're going to get some elevation onto it, it's difficult for the goalkeeper not to save it. And the sponsors at the stadium did Brighton a massive disservice because they nominated Steele as the man of the match when I think every save he made I could have made. The most impressive save all night by far was De Gea's from Alexis McAllister, and as I said, prior to that handball, I thought Shaw was the best player on the pitch again. Shaw's a player who has the character. There are plenty of others in that squad, but there aren't enough. And I agree with Rich, there are tactical elements to it. They were certainly against Arsenal, which was another one of those defeats that wasn't one of the worst defeats in terms of performance-wise, but they were caught between two stools. There was a real indecision about them, particularly after they equalised. When they equalised, you thought they can take the game to Arsenal now, and they led that game as well. They went 1-0 up, but there was an uncertainty about them, and when you looking at it that day, I think everybody knew then how limited this team was, and this squad has a ceiling, and it's another big summer coming up, and the uncertainty doesn't help. But United have done their forward planning, and they've certainly marked the card of a number of players who I think it's when you look at those players who we know that United regard as sellable assets. I don't think anybody would quibble about their futures and all that their futures should be away from Old Trafford.
Before we move on, Samuel's been very modest there, discussing his five-a-side ability, because I've got a very well-placed source, who informed me at the halfway line last week at five-a-side, on his weak foot, first time Samuel rifled one top corner. Samuel, can you confirm or deny my sources?
It wasn't halfway line, but it was left-footed. It was on the run. It went in off the post, and it was a great goal. It was a great goal. I really did surprise myself. Yeah.
We'll leave it there for part one. We'll be back in a moment for part two. Rich, we'll start by looking at some individual performances a bit closer then. I think it's fair to start with Shaw, who, as Samuel said, we was discussing his player ratings, I thought was fantastic. Again, he's made kind of an effortless transition to centre-half, where he's played quite a few times this season, actually. He says he enjoys the position. But he was really good, wasn't he, up until, obviously, the handball in those dire moments. And so how impressed have you been with him since he's relocated to central defence? And it says a lot about his performances, doesn't it, that Harry Maguire was on the bench last night. He's obviously come back, and there's not much discussion about him, is there? It's all went a bit quiet because everyone's just looking at Shaw. He's doing his work incredibly well, and Maguire's just not going to get back in the team when Shaw's playing like that.
No, we spoke to Shaw after the game. The quotes would be out late Saturday night for the Sunday ahead of the West Ham game, and it was weird because obviously Shaw came to the mix zone and away from the cameras, he was really down on himself, really harsh on himself again, and that shows how much he's owning this mistake. He's not trying to hide away from it. He didn't leave the Amex with a hood over his head. He confronted the press and said, this was down to me. I lost as the point. But I almost felt like saying to Shaw, well played, because he did play well for 95 minutes. And as Samuel said, he didn't put a foot wrong. He just put a hand wrong momentarily, and that's what cost United the game. And it is those fine margins at the top level that do so often dictate these matches and can determine the results. So often in the past, United have been the beneficiary really of moments like that, and right now they're still a team in transition, and they've got to just maybe deal with the fact that these things do happen. That is football, and whatever happens this season, if United were to somehow miss out on top four football, it wouldn't be because Luke Shaw's handball the Amex. There'd be a lot of other factors involved in that, but I think he's been really good. I think I've been really impressed with him, and long term you could even argue that he's maybe better at centre-back than he is at left-back in a way, but the problem is United don't have anyone else at left-back at this moment in time that you'd really want to be playing there. Dalot had another sort of mixed game, but that's not his natural position, so it'd be too harsh to criticise him there. Malacia, a mixed bag. For every good performance he has worrying ones as well. Maybe someone like Alvaro Fernandez in a few years down the pipeline might be someone who could play left-back for the first team, and then Shaw could play a bit more centrally, but I think just what's encouraging now is that Lisandro Martinez, we'd all say is undroppable. He's one of the first names on the team sheet. And this is no disrespect to Martinez, but if United are missing him now, it's not as big a blow because you'd be quite comfortable putting Shaw there as that left-footed centre-back. Yes, he's not got exactly the same skill set, but he's got many of the technical abilities Ten Hag wants from a centre-half. He's got the right mentality, the right attitude. He really does care. He really does want success of this United side. And I think, he does deserve credit, as odd as it seems. And I know that it can, for some cynics, it might feel like, why are we all trying to save the scapegoat? Do you know what I mean? Why are we trying to stop him being the sacrificial lamb? Why are we trying to protect him so much? But he was really good. And I think you've got to give him credit for that. And he's got this chance going forward now, hopefully in these last few games, to prove that he's good enough as well and can do it. And yeah, I think you've also got to consider that it would have been such a satisfying clean sheet for United. They would have gone, I think, level with Barcelona on 27 clean sheets this season if they'd kept one last night, and they didn't, so we can't go too much into that. But I do think that for large parts of the game, I know Brighton dominated and they had a lot of shots, but they didn't always get into those key areas in the box. There weren't too many clear-cut opportunities they missed, and it was similar to the Tottenham game, I thought, in that the centre-backs weren't at fault from open play that often. I know they give away the free kick at the end and then there's the handball, but for the majority of the game they coped okay. And the real test now is how United react to it. And I think Shaw's mentality to come out after the game and speak to the press and insist on doing it and to apologise, that is a positive going forward for United, that they've got characters like that will own it. They don't hide away and try and avoid the blame. They will take responsibility. And now the time for talking's over. They've got to go and walk the walk on Sunday evening. But yeah, in a weird way, I thought Luke Shaw did play well.
No, I think that's nicely said, Rich. I completely agree, and I think most would agree with that. He did play well. It's just football's a funny game, isn't it? If you handball in the last minute, you will get a little bit of slack. Samuel, let's talk about Marshall then. From a good performer to an excellent performer. Mark was just talking about his finishing, the sarcasm, just to clarify. His finishing, it's been quite poor. He obviously didn't take his chances against Brighton, as you've just discussed in the first part. I don't think he's been actually that good since he came back. His link-up play, he's had his moments where he's looked at an asset. But, I think it's time for the club. We all know the story with Marshall. I think Neville said that if we didn't need Gary Neville, we'll know what his situation is. United are obviously interested, or the priority is to sign a striker in the summer. I've put it to you a few times that they might actually need two strikers, because with Marshall looking how he is, and I think, let's see how Harry Kane comes in. Would you agree that perhaps they're going to need another clinical forward, perhaps, and maybe get creative in the market, because this team is really screaming out for a goal scorer, or maybe two?
I completely see your point, and especially with Weghorst, who's got 2 goals in 26, and nobody's really surprised by that either. That they do need to have something in mind there, but again, it's the nuances of that. You lose count of them, because they have to try and get Marshall out, because there is some resale value there of the players who are not going to be, who aren't cut out for taking United forward. He is one of them. So, given his contract situation, it's sensible to look for a buyer and try and cash in, and then see what you can do with strengthening other areas of the squad. I don't think in this day and age as well, like the whole thing of, do you need 2 number 9s? A lot of teams would say no. City don't have 2 number 9s. I know Alvarez is, backup. To dub him as backup to Haaland would probably do him a disservice. But he's such a fluid forward, and he's a decent goal scorer as well. My dad said last night that apparently Paul Ince, who has never been renowned for his punditry, shall we say, or his management, he was a very good player, but since his playing career, he's not really had much joy. But he said that apparently Marshall is scoring goals for fun. Now, he's got 2 in 14 starts this season.
Yeah, he said Wan-Bissaka's one of the best defenders in the world. My eyebrows were raised to that. Don't get as wrong as he's made a little bit.
Marshall must not be having much fun then, must he? If he scores goals for fun, he must be quite down on himself.
Exactly, yeah.
Did he have the wine at half time? And did he come out with...
Maybe
that was a possibility.
Or maybe he had it already and they brought out the bottle and it was empty. Who knows? Not that we're making any such allegations, but as I said, like this Marshall period early in the season when he was coming on in games and doing quite well, it was like, there's a justifiable argument that they're better off with him. Then, when he's fit and he has a run of starts, you're reminded why they need a striker, because he doesn't score enough goals, he doesn't work hard enough, he doesn't complete 90 minutes, and he's always prone to injury. I mean, last night, Ten Hag really did he lost his rag with him. He slapped his thighs and he admonished him. And we knew that he was, even though the first couple of substitutions didn't include Marshall coming off, you still know he's not going to complete 90 minutes because he never completes 90 minutes in the Premier League. It dates back to January 2021. And it says a lot about him that Wout Weghorst comes on and replaces him. And Weghorst is useless. It's all commitment, no quality. With Marshall, there is quality, but the commitment's not there. When he actually came back to the bench after coming off, because he had to go off the pitch at the far side, wherever it was, it felt like it'd been about 10 minutes since he came off. And I said to Rich, crikey, he's just actually appeared now. So even when he's walking around the pitch, I can confirm he moves pretty much at the rate that he moves on it. And the parallel with what happened at Brighton 5 years ago is pretty fascinating with Marshall, because it applies mainly to him. A month after that game, his agent came out and said he wanted to leave. And then, of course, you've got this power struggle, and the pre-season tour happened where he went AWOL because his partner was giving birth and he was fined, and his relationship with Mourinho never really recovered. And, of course, the club were always there, and you knew it because that was the mood of the club at the time. They're always going to back the player over the manager. Marshall and Pogba are two great examples that at United, you always back the manager over the player, because indulging both of them has not been remotely justified. Neither of them have made good on the perks that have come with their rewards or their remuneration or their privileges. And it's remarkable to think Marshall's been at United for nearly 8 years now. He turns 29 next year, and there'll still be some cranks out there that are talking about his potential, but you've just got to cut loose now. He's not cut out for it. He's got to be cut loose. He's given United some great moments, but it's the same record being played every week with him. Maybe he'll salvage his season with something in the run-in, but I certainly wouldn't be waiting with bated breath for that.
Yeah, it's probably time to say goodbye. I think we'd all agree with Anthony Martial. Or au revoir. The fact that the attack didn't really fire, did it, Rich? Let's be honest about it. I mean, you kind of picked up on Anthony's performance, I noticed, with your piece for the morning. And I was just quickly got up his stats there from the season. I mean, 8 goals and 4 assists. Online, 8 goals and 2 assists. Go sack me. It's a transfer market there with the separation of the stats. But I was just wondering, what do you think is going to be a successful season for Martial next year? Because I know your kind of angle was that kind of game, that performance summed them up really his time at United so far.
Do you mean Anthony, Stephen?
Who have I said, Samuel?
You said Marshall.
You Anthony.
Did it? Oh, there you go.
Anthony,
So it turns out
it is, and there are too many Anthonys at United.
It turns out I've actually been drinking the bottle of wine, not Poland's, so I can confirm. I've had the bottle of wine before coming on the podcast. Yeah, sorry, Rich. I was the head was messed in the stats there. Anthony, Brazilian Anthony, is who I'm talking about. What looks like a successful season for him next year in terms of goal contributions, and what does he have to do to be considered a successful signing, really? Because a hefty transfer fee arrived, obviously high expectations on his shoulder. But it's been probably a thing, an indifferent season, inconsistent season, hasn't it? He showed flashes of his ability, but it's not always been seen across the 90 minutes. And he obviously had that moment last night, didn't he, where he lost his head a little bit. But Ten Hag came out and defended him, didn't he? I guess that's why he likes Anthony, because he's got that kind of fiery character about him.
Yeah, that's why he loves his South American contingent, really, because they've got that fight and that passion and that tenacity that United need. You think of all the great United teams, you know, they didn't take crap on the pitch, did they? They had a bit of fight about them, and they knew how to hold their own. And if United want to be the best team, you know, in the Premier League again and best team in Europe, then they need to have that inner fight. And I think players like Anthony are crucial to that. I mean, the Brighton game was Anthony's 40th appearance for United. Like you said there, what's he got? 8 goals, 4 assists?
8 goals and 2 assists. I'll get that right
goals.
for the second time.
Okay, 8 goals, 2 assists. I mean, I suppose you expecting hopefully to get close to double figures in both, ideally for next season. And, there's 2 things about Anthony that has always going to be a disadvantage. One, he's a winger, so he's always got to have the goal contributions held against him. Whereas you watch some of the other best players in Europe, it's not always just about their own output. It's what they do in the build-up. It's how crucial they are to the way the team plays. If Anthony can work on his link-up play and become that crucial to United's attack, then the goals and assists will come, but they also don't matter as much because his impact's felt elsewhere. But, I mean, some more goals will definitely shut his critics up. And the other thing's the price tag, which United have paid too much for Anthony. We all know that. You look at his record from Dutch football, that is not a £85 million player United are committing to spend on him. That is not an £85 million player. You look at Matoma last night for Brighton. He's everything you want from a winger. Anthony is not right now. Anthony has those abilities. He's got all the raw attributes. He's going to need time. He's going to need patience. But he's a work in progress. And he certainly can get to a level, you sense, when he can repay that price tag and where he can be an elite world-class footballer. But he just has so much work to do. Another key aspect for me as well is the fact that he only moved to Europe, 2021? He's just only had 2 years now in European football, never mind the Premier League. Or was it 2020? Yeah, he's still new
2020, I think, yeah.
Yeah, January 2020, was it? Or summer 2020? So he's approached his 3rd year now in European football as well. So he's still new to Europe as much as he's new to England as well. So he needs time to bed in and to hit the ground running. And I think from next season, we should be able to judge him fairer. Another key aspect, I think, of Anthony's whole dilemma is he doesn't have that static centre forward or someone who's good through the middle, really, as a consistent player for him to link up with, for him to put the balls into the box for, and, for him to get more assists, really. Because we saw in that Forest game, and I know it was only Forest, but he has got that ability. He knows how to wait a pass. He knows how to time a run. He's got that intelligence. And I think once he's got an established forward line that he's part of, he will become a much more potent option himself. Because imagine Anthony's there, cutting inside, plays a 1-2 with a striker who's actually in the box. He can lay it back off, Anthony can have a go at goal. It does feel like he's having to do things alone quite a lot. He goes on this one-man mission. I think there are some raw, sort of crude similarities between him and Ronaldo's first season at United in a way that's maybe too much about the flamboyance and trying to prove himself than it is about contributing to the team. Obviously, it's...
And they're both... He's going to go and win 5 Ballon d'Ors, though, isn't he? Anthony will.
Ronaldo was way better as well.
Yeah. But I do think that there is... I think there is something about him. And of course, Ronaldo was much younger as well than Anthony when he first joined United. Anthony is 23 now. So he's getting... He'll be much closer to... He needs to be hitting his peak much earlier than Ronaldo. There's less expectation on Ronaldo immediately than the point is on Anthony because of the price tag. But, he's a work in progress. He's still an anomaly. I think it's too early for us to start judging him, too harshly right now. There has been enough evidence. And I said to Samuel, I said it in my piece as well, that you'll find out if someone's a pessimist or an optimist if you ask them to evaluate his season so far, because for some people, he's got all the raw attributes to be world-class, and for others, he looks like a one-trick pony who's a waste of money, to be quite frank with you. And it's down to him now to prove where he goes. The fact is, Ten Hag is an optimist. He likes him. He'll give him the chances. He'll give him the opportunity. But the fact of the matter is that he's got to deliver now. And with someone like Ahmad coming back from his loan this summer with a point to prove, someone who is getting the goals and the assists, that's the kick at the backside that Anthony needs to really take his game to the next level.
Can't please everyone, can you, Rich? Certainly can't in football. But I think it's a good point you made about his link-up play. I think when I've been watching United over the last few weeks or last few months, I've been thinking, what would they look like with Harry Kane in there? And he's fantastic at link-up play. Harry Kane saw it over the years of his partnership with Heung-min Son and the way they link up to deadly effect, and the goals and assists they both produce. And I think it'd be fantastic to see Kane with Rashford on the left and Anthony on the right, and that would be a deadly front three. We'll leave it there though, guys, for part 2, and we'll be back in part 3 for a look ahead to West Ham on Sunday afternoon. So Samuel, you're back in the capital on Sunday across the London Stadium. An old former United manager, David Moyes at the helm. West Ham obviously struggling this season, top half last season, but towards the bottom this year. 34 points, but they're starting to pick up. I think the last few games have started to look a bit better. So what are your expectations really? We've discussed United's away form and how they tend to struggle in those kind of games. So on paper, it's actually going to be a bit of a tricky game, isn't it? Because they do need to win here, or they do need at least to get a point, because Liverpool are starting to breathe down their necks in fifth.
That's absolutely true. I think it's like Alan Partridge with still good news about the chocolate oranges, in that it's still good news about playing a team in the bottom 7 of the table, because United have beaten the other 6 they've faced away from home. So I think that's what Southampton, Leicester, Leeds, Everton, Wolves, and another one that I should have named, but I've not been able to, or I can't think of their name now. But they've beaten all of them, and so I think that probably gives them a bit of a fillip going into this game, despite the manner of the defeat at Brighton. They have done it at the fodder in the league, if you like, and I think they've kept quite a few clean sheets against these teams as well. Certainly did against Leeds, Wolves, Southampton, Leicester. They didn't at Everton, but they've had similar wins against them as well. I think Forest was probably the most dominant, because I suppose it's not too difficult if you play well on the day to dominate Forest, given that they are, for all intents and purposes, a team of individuals, given the way they were assembled. I'm still not quite sure whether the fact that West Ham have got a European semi-final in midweek is going to be a help or a hindrance for United. That could go either way, because it's the first leg for West Ham that they're playing. I think it's against Alkmaar next Thursday. So I don't think David Moyes would necessarily be looking to make wholesale changes to rest them now. I think if the game was coming in between the 2 legs, that would have been a possibility. Arsene Wenger certainly did that at Old Trafford in one of his last games as Arsenal manager, because that fell between the two semi-final games against Atletico Madrid, and Arsenal played a shadow side at Old Trafford. They completely tossed it off, and a lot of managers do that, especially with the Thursday-Sunday schedules. Everybody knows. Everybody doesn't like a Thursday-Sunday schedule. I think Rich probably is one of the few does, because it does allow him to get along to his beloved Wrexham at 3 p.m. on a Saturday. So that's probably the only perk for those who want to go along to a match, get their football fix on a Saturday off. But I do fancy United to win this one, purely because of their record against the teams that are lower down the table in the bottom half. As you said, with that stat against the better teams in the league away from home, there were so many original ways of making it sound dreadful. I think 6 points from 33 against the top 12 is another one.
It, can't you?
But yeah. However way you manipulate it or you present it, it doesn't reflect well on United. But it does help them that for the rest of their games, they've got 4 home games, haven't they, out of 6, and their home form has been pretty excellent this season. I think it's just the 2 games they've not won at home in the Premier League against Brighton and Leeds. But given them, as I said, because they lost that game in midweek against Brighton, I always felt if they'd taken 4 points from these 2 games this week, that would have been pretty good going. I don't think anybody expected them to take 6 points. I don't think anybody seriously expects them to beat Brighton, frankly. So, and as Ten Hag said, when they have had a setback this season, they have tended to respond with a win. Although I'd say the midweek setback, you wouldn't categorise it with the dreadful defeats to Sevilla and Newcastle, Liverpool, City, Brentford. It was a different variety of a bad defeat. But I do fancy United to actually respond this weekend. If they don't, then you're really going to see the true nature of the character of this team, because I think do Liverpool play on Saturday? So they could be 3 points behind United at kick-off.
Brentford 5:30 kick-off, so it'll be very interesting.
That's right, yes. Yeah. Indeed.
Changes, Rich. Let's discuss some changes, as David Bowie once said. I'd probably have Sancho on the left. I'd probably play Anthony on the right, not Anthony Marshall. And I'd have Rashford through the middle. I'd also probably return Eriksen to the side, actually, because I think Eriksen Casemiro and Fernandes are the three best midfielders available. Would you agree with that? Would you make any changes yourself? Would it be the same back four to play West Ham?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? I do think that because West Ham, you might get away with playing Malacia at left back again, just a bit of energy and just to mix it up.
Jared Bowen's on fire.
But I think United just need to freshen it up a bit. Really, I think you can get too complacent sometimes by sticking with a team that the players are going to be down themselves after the man of that late defeat at Brighton. I think you've just got to get just a bit of fresh energy in there and players who have a point to prove. I think Malacia would be worth a go on the left, and then you can change it right back, either Dallo or Wan-Bissaka, whoever you feel fit. I think what could be crucial for me as well is playing Fernandes back in that deeper midfield role if you can do it. Play either Sabitzer or Eriksen in the more advanced attacking midfield role. I just think in recent weeks, the Casemiro-Fernandes link-up play as a midfield axis has been really a joy to watch. They've both been on the same wavelength. They've made things happen. It's credit to Fernandes that he will play wherever he's asked to, and he'll just get on with it. And still, even against Brighton, some of the balls he was playing were good. It didn't all quite click, but he's at least got that idea, those ideas. He's got that energy. So I'd drop Fernandes deeper. I think that would be important in the midfield battle, playing along Casemiro. Mention as well on Casemiro, very lucky that he's not suspended for Sunday because he definitely should have been sent off.
Taxes and yellow cards,
against
isn't it, Casemiro? He loves yellow cards.
Yeah. I mean, the referee in general, there was a lot of yellow cards that should have been handed out, but I think Casemiro was so lucky. He got booked, and then he should have got booked once or maybe even twice afterwards, and it was just all a bit reckless and chaotic by the end. So I'd put Fernandes and Casemiro in. Like you said, the fact that Eriksen didn't play at all, maybe that was the intensity of the game. Maybe the workload's been a bit too much for him since he's come back. I mean, I think it's refreshing, actually, that United have had a key player back and not just thrown him in and played him every single second he's been available, because they've been guilty of that in the past, and it's not always the right thing to do. And if you look at Eriksen's 3 appearances against Brighton this season, he was an unused sub. He played in the cup semi-final, was bad. He plays a false 9 in the second game of the season. So, he's still someone that they need a proper alternative to him. I think that was glaring against Brighton. I mean, Ten Hag said it was the perfect game for Fred. I'd hate to see a game that's not perfect for Fred because he was dreadful. And yeah, the forward line is tricky, isn't it? Because still, you've got 3 players who don't quite link up in the same player. They're all trying to do different things. You've got Rashford, who's very direct, Marshall, who's Marshall, and you've got Anthony, who's trying to do things on his own, trying to cut inside, and the balance isn't quite there yet. But I agree with you. I think Sancho, Anthony do complement each other quite well as inverted wingers, and then Rashford through the middle. I mean, he's better than the alternatives, isn't he? So yeah, I think for me, it would be Sancho on the left, Rashford through the middle. Same as you, either Eriksen or Sabitzer in midfield. Probably Eriksen because he's fresh, but I think Sabitzer as well is good at that attack midfield role, driving into the box, and then Malacia at left back just to freshen things up, really.
That'll be interesting then if Bowen's on form down that wing with Malacia. Samuel, just the end, can you give us a very quick update on Weghorst's future, who I haven't actually asked you about? And before we jump off, you've got to compete with Rich's story. His pick and mix story, which was expertly told, may I say myself.
Oh, that was. I won't be able to have the same gravitas.
So give us an update on Weghorst's future, and do your best to compete with Rich then on that front.
From what I've been told, United have just decided that there won't be a permanent deal there. There wasn't an option to buy or an obligation to buy when they negotiated that loan arrangement with Burnley back in January. It's not particularly surprising news, given that, as I said earlier, he's got 2 goals in 26 games. If his output had been, indeed, both of them with the goalkeeper literally lying down on the floor and the goal open. So, however, again, if you want to manipulate it's not just stats you can manipulate. It's even phraseology of how goals are scored and how easy they are. But it's not, as I said, it's not surprising when I was told it, given that it's 2 goals and 26, and there would have been some logic, I think, in keeping him permanently had his output actually been good, because you talk about having a backup striker who's going to be quite cost efficient and actually is aligned with the way the team plays. But nobody's ever really seen that with Weghorst. He's a battering ram. He, as Gary Neville said, he shouldn't be at the club. Everybody knows why they went for him. They didn't have any money to spend in January, and Ten Hag, for better or for worse, he seems to favour players whose education has been in the Netherlands, and that has served United well to a certain extent with Eriksen and Lisandro Martinez, but with other players, Tyrone Marshall is still quite young, and maybe there's potential there, but he's not. He's been the poorest permanent signing, and with Weghorst, he was just a stopgap. He was a slightly better version than Odin Igalo at the time he signed. Unfortunately for Weghorst, his scoring record is far worse than Igalo's. Igalo's was actually pretty good. The pandemic pretty much killed his United career. Up until then, he was doing well, and he went out on a high with that half volley in Linz.
Come on, Samuel, you can't get out that easy.
Well, okay. So this is my Curb Enthusiasm moment. But of course, if anyone's ever used the M6 toll, you want to get into a vacant bay just to avoid being behind an idiot in a car who doesn't know what they're doing. There wasn't a vacant bay. There were two vehicles in front of me. The first vehicle's taken a little bit of a while to get going, but eventually it got going. And then I'm behind the next vehicle in line, and immediately I'm concerned because the Neanderthal, frankly, attempts to pay with his phone rather than his bank card. Which, why would you do that? He tries it once, he tries it twice, it doesn't happen. His arm goes back into the vehicle, and then suddenly, from the passenger side, his son, his stepson, whoever, his relative, this chap who's probably in his late teens or early 20s and looked a little bit like Dexter from Dexter's Lab, scurries out of the vehicle and to the boot, opens it. There's a bag in there that's the size of a body bag, and he's opening every zip compartment possible, clearly looking for the bank card. He can't find the bank card. Eventually, I didn't see him pick up the card, but eventually he's done his job. He shuts the boot. There's no hand up, no sorry, sorry to have kept you waiting. I've been waiting a good 2 minutes now. He goes back into the car, hands the card over to the driver. The driver pays. And I'm thinking, great, and he pays it. I don't know, the second or third attempt. He can't get the card working initially, but it does. And then he wants a receipt, and of course the receipt goes flying. And rather than the driver putting the gear seat into manual, handbrake on, he sends Dexter out round the car, scurrying after the receipt. And at that point, I thought, okay, I've got a bib now because that's that. So I bibbed. This Neanderthal swore at me. I couldn't quite make out where it was. The M6 is near Birmingham. Nothing against Brummies, but sometimes it's difficult to make out what they say. And apparently the other little Dexter swore at me as well and gave me a V sign. And eventually, once Dexter's back in the car, they go off. So it comes to my turn. I've got my card, of course, and the barriers come up immediately, and I discover that the idiot in front had actually paid twice, and he'd paid for my M6 toll. And the added bonus was that there was a receipt to gather, so I actually made money on it. I probably shouldn't declare that on a podcast, but I suppose it's a decent payoff to it. So yeah, that was by far and away the most entertaining part of the journey down on the M6 southbound.
That was excellent. See, Ty's under pressure now. Ty's got to have a story. We're run out of time this season. Richard's
got to regale us, hasn't he?
Samuel's to deliver.
Yes,
when he's next.
Richards was great. Absolutely, I know.
I got told off at Brighton as well. I've not actually mentioned this, but I got told off at Brighton because I thought the food in the press lounge was self-serve, but it wasn't.
And
the woman came back out when I was sort of scooping chips onto my plate, and I was having a hefty portion of.
And she went, "Stay away from the pick and mix. You stay away from.
Yeah.
We've been told about you. We've been warned."
There's a picture of me do not serve. But,
just before we go, then a message to the listeners: we've hit 2,000 subscribers on YouTube, so thanks for the support. Head across there if you haven't already and subscribe. Plenty of content. We've got the Jimmy Murphy statue unveiling on board, and we've got extra podcasts coming your way following Erik ten Hag's press conferences, and they'll also be uploaded on YouTube. So thank you very much for your time, Samuel, today.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Appreciate it.
And thank you, Rich, as always.
Thank you very much.
And to both the lads and to listeners, have a fantastic weekend. Thank you very much. Take care.